At my wedding reception, I was fixing my veil in the reflection of a copper backsplash I had spent 3 months restoring by hand. The metal was polished to a mirror finish, which is the only reason I saw her. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, was standing directly behind me. She did not see my eyes in the copper. She just saw my drink sitting on the bar. I watched her pull a small glass vial from her clutch, 3 clear drops into my champagne. I did not turn around. I did not scream. I waited for her to walk away to greet a senator's wife. Then, with the steady hands of a surgeon, I simply reached out and switched our glasses. Her poison was now in her hand, and the real wedding drama was about to begin. Drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I would love to know who is part of our community. Most brides would be hyperventilating in the bathroom after seeing their new mother-in-law try to drug them. But I am a restoration architect. I deal with crumbling foundations and structural failures for a living. Panic is a luxury I cannot afford. What I felt in that moment was not fear. It was static load. That is the engineering term for the immense silent weight a beam carries right before it decides to either hold the roof up or snap in half. I walked back to the head table, my heels clicking a steady rhythm against the hardwood floor. I checked my pulse. 80 beats per minute, elevated but controlled. I smoothed the silk of my dress and sat down next to Ethan. The man who saved children's lives as a pediatric surgeon but could not see that his own mother was a pathogen. He squeezed my hand under the table, his thumb brushing over my ring. He looked at me with so much love it almost hurt. He whispered that I looked beautiful. He had no idea that 10 feet away his mother was currently sipping champagne that she intended to be my destruction. I looked across the table. Eleanor was seated now. She was holding court with my parents, laughing at something my father said, playing the role of the benevolent matriarch perfectly. She looked at me. Her eyes were cold, dead things buried under layers of expensive mascara. She raised her glass, my glass, in a silent toast to me. A little smirk that said, "Checkmate, darling." She thought she was the architect of this moment. She thought I was just some lucky girl who had stumbled into her dynasty, a problem to be solved with a checkbook or a vial of chemicals. I picked up my water glass. My hand did not shake. I took a slow, deliberate sip. The water was cold. It tasted like clarity. I watched Eleanor take another drink of the champagne. She was so confident in her cruelty. She had spent the last 2 years trying to bulldoze me, treating me like a squatter in her son's life. She called my work dirty. She offered me 6 figures to disappear. But she forgot one thing about restoration architects. We know exactly where the weak points are. And we know exactly when a structure is about to collapse. I set my glass down. I smiled back at her. And I waited. To understand why I didn't stop her, why I didn't grab her wrist and scream for the police right then and there, you have to understand the architecture of our war. This wasn't a sudden crime of passion. This was the demolition phase of a project Eleanor had been managing for 2 years. From the moment Ethan introduced us, I was a zoning violation in her perfectly curated world. The Sterlings are what people call old money, which usually just means their money is dusty and they are terrified of anyone who actually works for a living. I met Eleanor at the estate inspection. I was wearing work boots and a hard hat covered in drywall dust. She looked at my hands like they were contagious. She asked Ethan right in front of me if he was hiring the help for some remodeling. When he told her I was his girlfriend, she didn't smile. She just said, "Oh." The insults were never loud. They were structural. Small cracks in the foundation, designed to make me collapse. She would forget to invite me to family dinners. She would introduce me to their friends as Ethan's little project manager, ignoring my master's degree and my license. But the real structural failure happened 6 months ago. I was sitting in her library. She slid a creamy envelope across the mahogany desk. Inside was a cashier's check for $100,000. She told me it was a severance package. She said, "You are a lovely girl, Olivia, but let's be realistic. You are new money. You build things. We own things. You will never be comfortable at this table, and I am just trying to save you the embarrassment of trying." I looked at the check. It was more money than my parents made in 2 years. I looked at her. I didn't tear it up. I didn't throw it in her face. I just slid it back across the desk and said, "I think you're underestimating the cost of labor, Eleanor. I'm not for sale." That was the moment her eyes changed. That was when I stopped being a nuisance and became a threat. And threats have to be neutralized. In psychology, there is a concept called an extinction burst. I learned about it when I was studying how stress affects building materials, but it applies perfectly to narcissists. When a toddler realizes that screaming isn't getting them what they want, they don't quiet down. They scream louder, they flail, they break things. They escalate their behavior to a frantic peak right before they finally give up. It is the last desperate explosion of energy to force the world back under their control. The week before the wedding was Eleanor's extinction burst. She realized the bribes hadn't worked, the insults hadn't worked, the wedding was going to happen, so she went scorched earth. On Tuesday, she called our florist and tried to cancel the order, claiming the bride had died in a car accident. The florist, thank God, called me first. On Thursday, I found her in the bridal suite inspecting my veil. When she left, there was a jagged tear right through the lace. She claimed it caught on her ring, but I know the tensile strength of French lace. You have to want to rip it. I fixed the veil with gold thread, a technique I use in restoration. I didn't tell Ethan. I knew that if I told him, she would spin it. She would gaslight him, call me paranoid, say I was stressed and imagining things. She relied on the fact that her behavior was so insane that no rational person would believe it. So when I saw the vial at the reception, everything clicked into place. This wasn't random, this wasn't just hatred, this was the final detonation of her extinction burst. She couldn't stop the wedding, so she decided to ruin the memory of it. She wanted me sick, she wanted me humiliated, she wanted to prove to every high society guest in that room that I was weak, messy, and unworthy of the sterling name. She wanted a disaster. I just decided to let her be the victim of it. The thing about structural failure is that it is rarely instantaneous. Before a building collapses, it groans. The rivets pop, the wood splinters. You just have to be quiet enough to hear it. The reception hall was loud with applause as Ethan finished his speech. He was charming, self-effacing, perfect. He sat down and kissed my cheek, whispering that he was the luckiest man alive. Then the room went quiet. The tapping of a spoon against crystal echoed like a warning bell. Eleanor stood up. She looked regal in her silver gown. She held the champagne flute, the one with the gold rim, the one she had tainted high in the air. The room waited. She smiled at the guests, then turned her gaze to me. It was a predator's smile. Marriage, she began, her voice projecting with that practiced finishing school cadence, is about partnership. It is about knowing who you are and where you come from. A few of her friends at table 4 chuckled, and most importantly, it is about trust. Knowing that the person sitting next to you has your best interests at heart. She looked me dead in the eye on the word trust. I didn't blink. I raised my water glass. Eleanor raised the poisoned chalice. To the happy couple, she said. She tipped the glass back. I watched the golden liquid disappear. I watched her swallow. 1 gulp. 2. She drained it. For a moment, nothing happened. She sat down, looking triumphant. She turned to my father and started talking about his golf handicap. 1 minute passed. Then 2. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap, counting the seconds like a metronome. At 2 minutes and 40 seconds, the groaning started. Eleanor stopped talking mid-sentence. She blinked rapidly, her hand going to her throat. Her face, usually a mask of heavy foundation and composure, turned a violent shade of gray. She tried to stand up, maybe to excuse herself to the restroom, but gravity had other plans. Her knees buckled. She grabbed the tablecloth to steady herself, pulling a centerpiece of expensive lilies down with her. Then the emetic did exactly what chemistry dictated it must do. It wasn't a polite swoon. It was violent. Eleanor retched a guttural, ugly sound that silenced the string quartet. She vomited directly onto the head table, all over the silk runner, the china, and the skirt of her custom-made gown. The smell hit us instantly. The woman who had spent 60 years cultivating an image of untouchable perfection was now heaving on the floor in front of 200 of the city's elite. "Mom!" Ethan shouted, jumping up. "Mom!" She looked up at him, eyes wide and unfocused, gasping for air. "I don't," she slurred. "I don't feel." She collapsed sideways into the mess she had made. The room erupted into chaos. But I stayed seated for 1 second longer, watching the ruin. It was ugly. It was tragic. And it was exactly what she had ordered for me. In a crisis, most people panic. As the guests screamed and crowded around, I stood up and took charge. I told the DJ to cut the music. I directed the coordinator to clear a path for the paramedics. Ethan was on the floor with her, checking her vitals, his surgeon training kicking in. He was shouting commands, pulse-thready airways, clear pupils dilated. The paramedics arrived in 4 minutes. They loaded Eleanor onto the stretcher. She was barely conscious, moaning something incoherent. As they lifted her, her beaded clutch bag, which had been resting on her lap, slid off and hit the floor. The clasp snapped open. Contents spilled across the hardwood: a lipstick, a compact mirror, and a small empty glass vial. Ethan saw it. He froze. But that wasn't the smoking gun. Next to the vial was a piece of heavy cream-colored stationery folded into a square. I reached down and picked it up. I knew what it was before I opened it. It was in Eleanor's handwriting, elegant looping script. I walked over to Ethan. He was staring at the vial, his face pale. "Ethan," I said. My voice was low, cutting through the noise. "Read this." He looked at me confused, then took the paper. I watched his eyes scan the words. "Ladies and gentlemen, I must apologize for the interruption. My new daughter-in-law has struggled for years with personal demons. We hoped the stress of the wedding wouldn't trigger a relapse, but it seems the alcohol was too much. Please forgive the mess. We will get her the help she needs." It was a speech. A speech she had written before the reception. She hadn't just planned to make me sick. She had planned the narrative of my destruction. She was going to frame my poisoning as a drunken bulimic breakdown. She was going to take the microphone while I was vomiting and destroy my reputation forever. I saw the change happen in Ethan's face. It is a rare thing to watch a man become an orphan while his mother is still alive. The concern vanished, the panic vanished. His eyes went cold. He looked at the note, then at the vial, then at the woman on the stretcher. He finally saw the architecture of the trap. He realized that the monster wasn't under the bed. She was the one who had tucked him in. He folded the note and put it in his pocket. He didn't look at me. He looked at the paramedic. "She didn't have a stroke," Ethan said. His voice sounded like grinding metal. "She ingested an emetic and a sedative. Check her bag for the vial. And call the police." The hospital smelled like antiseptic and bad decisions. Eleanor was stabilized in a private room, the drugs flushed from her system, but the legal toxicity was just beginning. The police were waiting in the hallway. Officer Cardona, a man who looked like he had seen enough family dramas to last 10 lifetimes, was taking my statement. I didn't need to be emotional. I just needed to be efficient. I pulled up the file on my phone. While the paramedics were loading Eleanor, I had texted the venue manager. Because I had restored the Sterling estate, I knew exactly where the blind spots were, and I knew exactly where the 4K security camera behind the bar was angled. I had the footage in my inbox before the ambulance reached the hospital. I showed the officer the video. Timestamp 2:47 p.m. Eleanor looks around. She pulls the vial. She drops the poison. It was high-definition proof of a felony. Ethan walked out of Eleanor's room. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. He walked past me, past his father, who was sitting with his head in his hands, and went straight to the officer. "My mother is awake," Ethan said. His voice was clinical, detached. "She wants to make a statement." "Did she confess?" the officer asked. Ethan laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "No, she told me she did it to save me. She said Olivia was a gold digger who was ruining the Sterling bloodline. She said I would thank her one day." I watched Ethan. This was the moment. The cord was either going to snap, or it was going to strangle us. Eleanor had played her final card, the mother knows best defense. She was banking on 30 years of guilt and obligation to make him drop the charges. Ethan reached into his tuxedo pocket and pulled out the cream-colored stationery. The pre-written apology speech. The evidence of premeditation. Officer Ethan said, handing over the paper. "My mother didn't just try to assault my wife. She planned a character assassination. She wrote this before the reception started. This proves intent." "Ethan, don't," his father whispered from the chair. "She's your mother." Ethan turned to his father. "No," he said. "She's a criminal. And if you pay for her lawyer, you're an accomplice." He turned back to the officer. "I am pressing charges, and I am requesting an immediate restraining order for myself and my wife." I watched him sign the statement. It was the most romantic thing I had ever seen. He didn't just choose me. He amputated the limb that was killing us. He cut her off with the precision of a surgeon removing a tumor. There were no tears, just the sound of a pen on paper finalizing the divorce between a son and his toxic origin. It has been 12 months since the wedding. Eleanor is currently serving a 24-month sentence for aggravated assault and reckless endangerment. Her lawyer tried to argue diminished capacity, but the pre-written note destroyed that defense. You can't claim temporary insanity when you drafted a press release about it 3 days in advance. Ethan and I didn't move into the estate. We bought a fixer-upper on the other side of the city. It has good bones, but it needs work. Just like us. I'm sitting at our kitchen table working on a bowl I broke last week. It's a Japanese technique called kintsugi. You don't hide the cracks, you fill them with a lacquer mixed with powdered gold. The philosophy is that the piece is more beautiful for having been broken. The break is where the strength is. For a long time, I thought a perfect marriage meant no conflict. I thought it meant smooth surfaces and easy days. But Eleanor taught me something valuable. She tried to shatter us. She tried to find the stress points and hammer them until we crumbled. But she miscalculated the materials. When we sat in that hospital waiting room watching the police lead her away in handcuffs, Ethan and I didn't fall apart. We fused. The trauma didn't leave a scar. It left a seam of gold. We trust each other with a depth that most couples never reach because they are never tested. I know with absolute certainty that he will choose me, and he knows that I will see the threats he is blind to. I finish the bowl. The gold lines catch the afternoon sun shining brighter than the original ceramic ever did. It is imperfect. It is jagged. And it is unbreakable. If you believe that toxic family members don't deserve a seat at your table, hit that like button and share this story, and tell me in the comments what's the pettiest thing a relative has ever done at a wedding you attended.